Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. Much appreciate having you all with us. If you thought things were going to get any cheerier with me, no, they're not. But I promise you, after me comes lunch. And you'll have a break there. So what I wanted to talk to you about a little bit is what we call the red-green axis. I'm doing a bit of a bait and switch here. I know I'm down for the Muslim Brotherhood, and part of this will be the Muslim Brotherhood, but there's more to it. Red-green stands for the unholy alliance, if you will, among leftist hardcore revolutionary communists, plus the green is for Islam. The red-green axis is what we're going to talk about with a couple of additional groups thrown in. Everything here, of course, unclassified. Please ask me any questions that you would like. I have cards on my table in the back there. If you'd like to follow up with me afterwards or you think of questions later, please grab a card and feel free to contact me. This is my little Love Me page. And I also began life after grad school with the U.S. Marine Corps. That's kind of a long time ago, but I did not have an offer letter in my hand, and I was waiting for a particular response, which took its sweet time coming, 14 months to be exact. And in the meantime, I went off to officer candidate school at the Marine Corps in Quantico, Virginia. While I was there, the letter from these folks arrived. And so I went to the night before graduation at Quantico, and then I went into the captain and I said, I'm not going to graduate tomorrow or take the oath of office, which is a part of the graduation ceremony, because I got a better offer. They pay more money, and I don't have to wear green for the rest of my life. And off I went to 20 years undercover CIA ops, focused on Russia. But it was only as a contractor. I was in the civilian world already on 9/11 when my attention and everything shifted to Islam and the Middle East. And from that point onwards, I gravitated to the policy community, think tank community in Washington, D.C., where I have been happily associated with Frank Gaffney and the Center for Security Policy. First 4 years as a senior fellow, and since 2014 as the vice president for research and analysis there. Let me go then into this because there's an awful lot here, and I don't want to motormouth it. Pardon?
The most important reference you had on there.
Oh, my apologies. All right, look at this one over here, folks. This is the United West, headed by Tom Trento. My apologies. Happily associated with Tom and Mark and Alan and the gang for I forget how many years. All right, so the Unholy Alliance. What are we talking about? We're talking about the United States Muslim Brotherhood here, which united in 2014 under an umbrella group. It's called the USCMO, United States Council of Muslim Organizations. Unholy Alliance, together with the Black Lives Matter movement. Yes, they work together. And what I like to call the Alinskyite or Saul Alinskyite-like anarchists. And we'll get into these three groups. I want to talk about how they work together and what's going on in the country, which you'll have certainly noticed, but may not have realized completely how it all works together, how they all work together. From the start, I want to say, though, this is not something that is aimed at any particular president or candidate or political party. This is about tearing down the system. The U.S. Constitution, our system of law and order, that is the target. So what is the USCMO doing? Let's start with them. Their logo up there on the right-hand side, the red, white, and blue one there. Off on the left, what logo is that? Muslim Brotherhood, exactly. So these guys joined in an umbrella group, a group of groups, if you will, in 2014. It's grown to many dozens of membership now in the USCMO. The whole point of it is to infiltrate our political system and to grow up politicians, Muslim politicians, loyal to the Brotherhood agenda from the lowest grassroots level, like school board, library board, city council, and so forth, knowing that some of them will stick with politics, be successful, rise up, and they will be then infiltrated well and deeply into our political system. That's the idea. In this last election, we did see them fielding candidates. It's become more and more open now. Jetpack Inc. is just one of these manifestations of that national campaigning, infiltrating. It's, you know, ordinarily we would say any American, you know, taking part, joining in, being active in the U.S. Electoral system, this is a positive, this is a good. But not when the agenda being pursued is the Muslim Brotherhood. Let me keep going. Here is Nihad Awad. You may know his face up there in the corner. He is the executive director of CARE. CARE is Hamas. Hamas doing business as CARE in the United States. CAIR stands for the Council on American Islamic Relations. It is a direct offshoot of Hamas, terrorist organization, foreign terrorist organization, the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Nihad Awad has led this group since its founding, along with others. But here I want to point out what he said at a conference towards the end of 2015 in Chicago, when he made a direct and specific alliance between CARE, that is Hamas, with the Black Lives Matter movement. You can see that part highlighted in the yellow on this slide. Black Lives Matter is our matter. Black Lives Matter is our campaign.
Black Lives Matter is our matter. Black Lives Matter is our campaign.
It couldn't be more explicit than that. Here is a little more about the Black Lives Matter movement. So in 2013 is when it was founded. It is a direct project. It is a Marxist-Leninist offshoot of the Freedom Road Socialist organization. That is a Marxist-Leninist communist organization. The three top founders of the Black Lives Matter movement come out of, frankly, openly, avowedly communist background. The Black Lives Matter movement is dedicated to instigating chaos, disorder, and riots, seeking to get law enforcement, local law enforcement, to overreact, to give them martyrs for their cause, but the ultimate objective, bring down the system. And they are quite open about that. I'll show you some of their posters and other declarations. Here is the Freedom Road Socialist organization, which has a couple of branches in the United States, but it is openly Maoist socialist. It is anti-Israel, pro-BDS. Of course, that is boycott, divest, and sanction movement against Israel. Openly aligned with Palestinian terrorists in both Gaza and Judea Samaria. Notice the statement at the bottom. It dates back a little ways to 2001, but this was on their website, Freedom Road Socialist organization. We must be prepared, they say, to advance our interests and defend the people by any means necessary. You'll recognize that phrase because it's the name of one of the groups that is included under the overall Antifa network, and we'll talk about them in just a minute here. So these are abbreviations up here: Black Lives Matter movement and Movement for Black Lives. That's what those acronyms are. Come from the Freedom Road Socialist organization. They then in turn fund many dozens of other organizations, and that's how this works. Each organization has under it multiple offshoots that it funds and backs, and it's not always clear until you dig into it what the background is and where they come from. But if you do, this is what you find. Here is the little junket that some BLM folks took over to the Middle East 2 times last year in 2016, and they were over there in the name, they said, of shared struggle. This is a quote, of oppressed people, namely people of occupied Palestine, et cetera, and you can see their photo there where they were in, I think that was over in Judea and Samaria. Here is a statement from the Black Lives Matter movement. The URL I put there at the bottom of the slide for you so you can go look it up if you'd like to check it out. We are committed to disrupting the Western prescribed nuclear family structure. How's that? That is Black Lives Matter movement. It is open. It's not hidden. It's on their website. That's what Black Lives Matter movement is. Here's a piece of work. Khalila Sabra is an African-American convert to Islam. She works for MAS, Muslim American Society, which the Justice Department has identified as the overt arm of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States. She's got a couple of side gigs, or at least she did up through last year in 2016. And those had to do with both Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice, where she worked in the Executive Office for Immigration Review. I do not know if she is still in those positions as a contractor, but she was up until last year. She spoke at the same conference that I just mentioned Nihad Awad had spoken at about Black Lives Matter movement, and she also was a speaker there, and this is some of what she said, quote, "You will see Muslims murdered in the streets." And then she said, "We are the community that staged a revolution across the world." We, who's we? The Muslim Brotherhood, right? She's talking about North Africa and Egypt in particular. Staged a revolution across the world. If we could do that, why can't we have that revolution in America?
If we don't stand, you will see Muslims murdered in the streets. For no other reason than that they say, La ilaha illallah. Allah has empowered you to create justice on the earth. Let's clean our own house first. Let's recognize that we are the community that staged a revolution across the world. If we could do that, why can't we have that revolution in America?
I think that's called sedition. Went back and looked at her a little bit when I was researching this and found that some years previously, that is in May 2011 when Osama bin Laden was killed, as you might recall, she, working for MAS, there's MAS's logo here, again, Muslim Brotherhood, she was tapped to write the eulogy for Osama bin Laden to post up at the MAS website. And here's what she said, that bin Laden was a visionary who believed in the possibility of an Islamic State in Afghanistan. There was nothing wrong with that dream. Pure and merciful Islamic State in a Muslim land. Okay, this is contractor to DOJ and DHS on immigration. All right, let me talk about what we saw gathering steam, if you will, during the beginning parts of the presidential election just concluded last year. And I noticed probably towards the end of 2015, what was beginning to happen. I am happy and privileged to teach along with John Guandolo at the local level. We teach local law enforcement, sheriff's departments, police departments. And at this point, late 2015, early 2016, I asked John, could I add a unit, a block of instruction to our course? I think something's happening. I think something's gathering here, and you could see it on the campaign trail. It appeared to be most specifically directed at then presidential candidate Trump. But again, remember what I said at the beginning, this is not about any particular candidate or political party, it's about the system. In any case, I won't go through all of the various events that caught my attention, but this one in Arizona was notable, and they were physically blocking with vehicles and people, the motorcade, Trump's motorcade coming to Arizona for a campaign event. Luckily, at the time, Sheriff Joe Arpaio was still the sheriff of Maricopa County, and very efficiently and quickly and professionally cleared this mess off the road. But this was indicative of what was coming. I mention also here the Dallas Police Department massacre because it was such a turning point in terms of the violence, in terms of the death and the direct aiming to murder United States, in this case Dallas, Texas Police Department officers. So what you had in July of last year was a legitimate protest march, demonstration, which had a permit and was proceeding peacefully. In fact, a Black Lives Matter protest demonstration. And then this perpetrator, Johnson, Mika Javier Johnson, opened fire, as you'll recall, with a sniper weapon against the Dallas Police Department, which was providing security for the event, eventually killing 5 of them and injuring another 7. You'll see the photos there that I included. One is of his, that was the wrong one. One was of his weapon up in the corner there, and then down here what was left of him after they sent in a kind of a robot, little robot with an IED, taking a page out of some tactics being used by the military over in the Middle East, and that sort of took care of him. But what I want to point out here as well about that march and the Black Lives Matter movement protest that was the event of that day, this was the guy, he calls himself a reverend, Jeff Hood, who was leading that protest. But I want to point out to you some of the things that he posted at his own social media sites a year previous to the massacre. He wrote on his social media online, quote, "The police are always prepared for a gunfight. We shouldn't be surprised when they actually get one." This is a reverend, he bills himself as a reverend in any case, leading the Black Lives Matter movement march. And then this whole crossover, you've heard this term Chrislam? Have you heard that before? This crossover, this merging of the idea that these could be one and the same or merged in some way, Christianity and Islam. And he writes, in our Islamophobic society, I have no question that Jesus is so intimately incarnated with and connected to our Muslim friends that he has become one. What? If we want to walk with Jesus in this moment of extreme oppression and marginalization, we will too. What? Become Muslim? Maybe not. All right, let's move on here to some of these hardcore black separatist, black nationalist movements that we've got going in the United States. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more, but I just want to give you a small flavor of what our local law enforcement is up against every single day out there on the streets, putting their lives on the line. Huey P. Newton Gun Club. Oh, and by the way, the images around this slide here on the corners, these are taken from these organizations' own social media sites, either Facebook or maybe Twitter, but these are their, identifying images from their websites. Blacks Against Racist Cops, American Defense League. Look at the logos. The one up in the corner here, that's Huey P. Newton Gun Club. The imagery is a bunch of cartridges, right? Down here taken in the lower right corner, this is from the African American Defense League Facebook page, and their image, most of us put our photos or, maybe a flag. They've got an armory full of weapons as their logo at their Facebook page. Black Knight Sniper Assassins. New Black Panther Party. They say they're not affiliated with the original 1960s Black Panther Party, but that's their imagery. Here's their manifesto, and again, this comes straight off of their own website. I'm not going to read all of it. You can. And by the way, anybody who'd like, I'll send this PowerPoint to you. If you would like this and to spend more time with it, because I know that we're going through it rather quickly, ask me and I'll send it to you. But just look at the demands that they're making there in terms of what the Black Lives Matter manifesto is claiming. Essentially, they want the police to stand down. They just want the police to go away and let them have control of the streets. That's, in summary, what that is. This is one of the individuals who is calling for black separatism, and he would like 5 southern states to secede from the United States government and belong to the black nation. They name Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, Alabama, and Georgia. That is called sedition and treason. All right, let me move to the third group here that I wanted to highlight for you among the Unholy Alliance. So remember, we started with the Muslim Brotherhood. We've just talked about the Black Lives Matter movement and the black separatist nationalist groups associated with it. The third element here now are what I'm calling the Alinskyite or anarchist hard left groups in America. This, of course, is a picture of Saul Alinsky. You know, all of you know Saul Alinsky or know of him? Pretty much you do. Of course you do. So that is Saul Alinsky, hardcore leftist out of Chicago. He died, I think it was 1972, but left behind this book, which has become the handbook, the blueprint for chaos and uprising in the United States, called Rules for Radicals. It is a handbook for revolution, in short. Nothing more than that. The tactics are to fracture society by any means necessary. Heard that phrase before? Cause chaotic protest in the street, uprisings against the law enforcement, police, literally to encourage street violence. What with the objective? To bring down society, to bring down law and order. And out of that chaos, their intent, their idea is that there's a chance for them to seize power and then look out. I want to highlight just a couple of the local groups that have come out of Saul Alinsky's group. He founded something called the Industrial Areas Foundation, IAF. And there are branches of the IAF all over the country now. They have a website. They're openly a Saul Alinsky group. Now, I'm focusing here on some of these metro areas chapters, and you'll see these states named here. Florida's not among them, but many others are. But I want you to look specifically at this group, this named group of the top leadership of the IAF. And you see bishop there, and you know, there's a rabbi there, and reverend there, and another reverend. Look at the yellow name, the name highlighted in yellow. That name is Usama Jamal. Usama Jamal is the Secretary General of the U.S. CMO. He is the head of the Muslim Brotherhood umbrella group in the United States. He sits on the top level group organizers of the Industrial Areas Foundation. Okay, you've got Muslim Brotherhood together with Saul Alinsky. That is something that I think a lot of people might not realize is going on, but there's his name, and you can see it at the website. It's right there. That's where I got it. Let me talk again about a county in Illinois. This is the county that includes Chicago, just by way of example. And the different affiliated member organizations just for that IAF group there in DuPage County. Look at all of these, but again, look at the ones highlighted in yellow. You've got the Islamic Center of Naperville, the Islamic Foundation of Villa Park, and a group called Mecca. These are all Muslim Brotherhood organizations. They are openly affiliated with Saul Alinsky's IAF, Industrial Areas Foundation. All right, let's go to Antifa. Antifa stands for, it's short for anti-fascist or anti-fascist action. In fact, its roots go back to the 1920s and the 1930s in Europe as the revolution in Russia, which you know took place in 1917, gathers adherents and steam. It picks up, and they're trying to export it out of Russia, of course, Lenin, Stalin at the time. And rising up at the same time is our various national socialist movements, particularly in Germany, Italy, and Spain. And so you've got the revolutionary communist street thugs, is what they were, on the streets of especially those countries, facing off against the brown shirts of the rising National Socialist Party, otherwise known as the Nazis. This goes back to the street fights between those groups. Nazis versus the communists. Antifa is the communists. Fascist, Nazis. I will tell you that in the United States today, the influence, the numbers of neo-Nazis, Nazis, fascists, skinheads, anti-Semites is minuscule. Perhaps 2,000 or 3,000 in the entire country. The numbers that are affiliated, identified with communism, with Antifa, are orders of magnitude more. Add a couple zeros to that original number. You're talking 20, 30, 50,000 adherents at least for the Antifa movement. Communist. Antifa is communism. So again, here took the name of the communist street fighters that faced off against the Nazis. There are now cells of Antifa, the new Antifa, all over the world, in particular in Europe, as you see there, Western Europe, even Eastern Europe, and the United States. Here are some of the images for them. You'll see that sign there, against white supremacy. Take a look at the folks holding the sign up. All right, here's another one of their signs. Become ungovernable, make war, I think that sign says. Again, highlighting this is not about a party or a president. This is about tearing down the United States of America. So 2016 is when Antifa really emerged in the United States. And this is when both the FBI and DHS, as we now know, began to be aware of them and to follow them. So did our group, as I mentioned before, with John Guandolo. We have the company that John has founded is called Understanding the Threat, understandingthethreat.com, by the way. Loads of terrific resources there if you have the time to take a look. And the FBI and DHS recognized more than a year ago that Antifa was confrontational, dangerous, instigators, and this is their quote, domestic terrorist violence during the 2016 political campaign. Oh, and yes, there's this. So here's our former president, Barack Obama, who formed a group called Organizing for Action, or OFA, while he was still in office. But rather than actually leaving office and going to wherever he's going to build his library and enjoy his retirement, he bought a very large, lovely mansion in the upper northwest section of Washington, D.C. called Kalorama, where he and his wife, Michelle, are now helping to lead the resistance. The resistance against what? Against our lawfully elected president and, pardon? We'll get to that. So there are the websites for that organization, Organizing for Action. Huge amount of donations, war chest, many chapters across the country. All right, let's talk about some of the other member groups, organizations within the overall Antifa umbrella. Revolutionary Communist Party. Again, I'm taking this stuff straight off of their publications and website. Again, if you'll look at the highlighted part in yellow, they make their objectives very clear. The ultimate all-out revolutionary struggle to sweep this system away. Not just Trump and Pence, our system, our Constitution, law and order. You think the Revolutionary Communist Party died in 1991? Think again, they did not. Workers' World Party, this is another one. They not only were very active during the campaign year of 2016 last year, but remained so. They were present at the Charlottesville, South Carolina riots back in August of this year, 2017. They openly support North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Openly. There's no hiding it. They're not being coy about it. Or World Workers' Party is obviously aligned with Antifa, another one of their events, Smash White Supremacism, and who's holding up the signs. All right, Revolutionary Abolitionist Movement, RAM. They decided that there are too many African Americans under arrest and in prison in America. And so they want to build an underground railroad to help them escape the state, escape out of the prisons. So that's one of their objectives there. How's that for a sign? All my heroes kill cops. Okay, people are marching on the streets of the United States of America with this. Yeah, you should cover your face. Indivisible. Indivisible grew out of former Democratic congressional staffers who suddenly found themselves unemployed after January 20th of this year. And so they founded the group called Indivisible with chapters across the United States. My numbers are probably completely out of date already in terms of how many they are. And they help others around the country to organize on how to disrupt town hall meetings of congressional leaders, how to conduct sit-downs at their offices, disrupt their course of business. That's indivisible. Berkeley. Berkeley was another watershed place time. 2 times this year, February and August of 2017, the Berkeley campus erupted into violence. You can see some of the ninja types there that typically dress like that, head to toe in black, covering their faces. Illegal, by the way, to do that, to cover your faces and appear in public. It's not being enforced. By the way, the mayor of Berkeley, he's a member on the Facebook group called By Any Means Necessary. You wonder why this is out of control at Berkeley? The mayor belongs to By Any Means Necessary. This is what they're chanting. No Trump, no wall, no USA at all. How's that? Refuse Fascism, another one of the groups within Antifa, and I'll talk a little bit more about them, but they are a very large contingent within Antifa, entirely violent, contributing to intending to tear down the system again, make this country ungovernable. They say it out loud. Refuse Fascism, their openly stated goal to drive the Trump and Pence fascist regime from power. They say so out loud. They're openly, as well, they too, supporters of Kim Jong-un and his regime in Pyongyang in North Korea. Oh yes, funding. We'll get to this because this is what holds everything together. This is what makes all this possible. George Soros, for certain. And again, as I'm saying, they fund groups, and each of those groups then funnels funding downward, downstream, group to group to group. And again, it makes it hard to trace the funding and where it comes from, but this is how it starts. Whoops. I wanted to point out that November 4 is billed to be a day of massive riots and chaos across the country, staged by Antifa. This map shows places at the Refuse Fascism website, which you can see up there at the top. That's the URL for it. They've got an event page, and this is on it, and those are the cities that are targeted for November the 4th. Again, Florida's not on here. Interestingly enough, also, Washington, D.C. is not on here, or any place in Virginia, but you'll see all the other cities there that are going to be targeted for violence and chaos on Election Day, local Election Day, November the 4th, in just a couple of weeks. I couldn't fit everything on a page, but this is just to give you an idea of how many and varied these groups are, of revolutionary Marxist groups in the U.S. The type font is very small, but you get the idea. Communist, Revolutionary Collective, Party for Socialism, I mean, on and on. These are hardcore leftist communist groups in the U.S., many of them part of the overall Antifa umbrella. Charlottesville, again, was all about Antifa. The group that had the permit to march and to protest around a statue of Robert E. Lee in Charlottesville that day were used as a catalyst, if you will, for the protests that were staged by Antifa. And what happened is that even though those protesters, the so-called fascist contingent, had the permit, were marching peacefully, were keeping within the parameters of what they were allowed to do under that protest permit, the police of Charlottesville actually channeled them out of the park where they were, the Robert E. Lee Statue Park, channeled them and forced them straight into the ranks of the waiting Antifa rioters that were armed with everything from pepper spray to 2x4s with nail studs in the end. You might have seen photos of these things. The mayor of Charlottesville and the police chief and department, well, I shouldn't say department because I don't know that, but the police chief and the mayor of Charlottesville were openly sympathetic to Antifa. And by the way, the very next day after that happened, they flew the Antifa flag from City Hall, the City Hall flagpole. These are some of the groups that were present in Charlottesville, Virginia. Just a little overview of who was there again. And by the way, some of those were paid protesters. We know now that a lot of them are recruited online on social media, for instance, by Craigslist ads that promise them a certain amount of money to protest, to come to Charlottesville from all over the country and to march and to protest. Again, the funders, and I'll get more into a list of those, but these are some of those of the funders. This is Saul Alinsky meets Management of Savagery. Who knows what Management of Savagery is? It's a document. It is a document that's never been published in hard copy that I know of, but it's on the internet. And it was posted in 2004 by an Al-Qaeda operative. And the theme of Management of Savagery is, if you can cause, now again, this is from Al-Qaeda, okay, from the Islamic jihad contingent, if you can cause society to collapse, to break down into utter chaos, then out of the savagery that ensues in a societal breakdown, if you can manage that, then you, whoever's causing this, can come out the other side and take control. That's Management of Savagery, and you'll see why I'm saying this whole agenda is Saul Alinsky meets Management of Savagery. More of the ninja types with their flags, red and black and white. All right. Let's conclude here with the assault on free speech, because this is something that is absolutely critical for all of us to understand. What is at stake here? Again, I can't say this enough. They're taking aim at the system. The Constitution is next. Free speech is already under fire. If they can successfully curtail free speech, get free speech to be limited by law, for example, the way it is done in Europe, to make it a criminal offense, for example, to criticize Islam, we're done. We're done. Here, so far, we are the only country that, well, Canada does too, but has within our Constitution, we of course have our Bill of Rights. The First Amendment of that guarantees the right to free speech, among other things. Canada, too, has something called a Charter of Rights and Freedoms, in which they, too, enshrine free speech and free expression. But you see what's happening in Canada. That's going down the tubes. But the point here being, if we do not defend that right of free speech, we will lose it, even though it's in our Constitution. Tyranny depends for its control on the ability to control the narrative, to control, to create, and to push the lie. If you've ever read Czechoslovakia at the time, poet, playwright, later president Václav Havel, a favorite of mine, he has written many things, but essays, for example, on living the lie is the name of one of those. When you can force your entire society to live a lie, which they know in their hearts is false, but they're forced or they acquiesce to live that lie, you've got control of those people. That's what I'm talking about here. Southern Poverty Law Center, you probably all know about this group. Their logo up in the corner there. They began, of course, with honorable goals to oppose racism, to oppose and speak out against the KKK back in the day. But they have changed a great deal over the years, and now I would argue themselves have become a hate group against traditional marriage, against anyone who is pro-life, pro-Christian. And these are some of the groups that have been listed now by the Southern Poverty Law Center as hate groups. Act for America, United West, Center for Security Policy, where I am, Jihad Watch. Why? Because we're anti-Muslim. We are haters, bigots, racists, Islamophobes. Did I miss anything? But the overt branches of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States, among these, CARE, ICNA, ISNA, that's Islamic Circle of North America, Islamic Society of North America, MPAC, Muslim Public Affairs Council, are not listed by the SPLC as like anti-Western civilization, maybe? No. The real target is freedom of speech. Again, this is a very nifty logo that I have borrowed from Understanding the Threat from John Guandola, because I think it's so evocative of what we're talking about. Okay, let me keep going and finish this up. Their open objective, and they state it very openly again. You know, this is the thing. None of these groups, none of these people hide who they are or what they're doing. They tell us out loud, and then we said, oh, you don't really mean that. You can't mean that. But here's what Southern Poverty Law Center spokesman said back in 2008. He said, we're trying to wreck these groups. We're trying to destroy them. Do we understand yet? Do we get it? Western civilization is the real target here. Of all of this unholy alliance I've talked about today. Again, Muslim Brotherhood, Black Lives Matter movement, hardcore leftist Solinsky anarchist types. In collaboration, you say they're very different. They have very different ideologies. Yes, they do. But the point being right now, they are allied because it's convenient. It is opportunistic for them, because they all want the same thing first, which is to tear down America, tear down our Constitution, our system of law and order, and more broadly, to tear down Western civilization. Management of savagery. Each one thinks that they will be the ones to manage the savagery of the collapse and emerge on the other side dominant. That's how this works. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation is the 57-member head of state, all Islamic countries in the world organization, largest international group in the world after the United Nations itself, openly has seceded, if you will, from the United Nations Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Instead, in 1990, issued something called the Cairo Declaration, which says that the only human rights are those granted under Sharia. So that is what we're up against, free speech there under assault by the OIC. You see how these come together and work together. This is Canada. They've passed a motion. That's what M means, Motion 103, in their parliament. The next thing is going to be legislation. Watch what's happening in Canada. Proposed by a Brotherhood-linked member of parliament named Iqra Khalid. They are now pushing for legalization of the criminalization of the criticism of Islam in Canada. It's already the case in Europe. Here I am speaking this past September at the OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, meeting in Warsaw, Poland, where our little team, we were 7 of us, spoke out in defense of free speech. I have the honor to say that every single time one of our members got up and spoke and had our 2-minute little, we call them interventions, little speeches, we got reprimanded from the head table. So I think we were on the mark. Funders, George Soros, obviously, many others. These are some of the other funders and founders, Black Lives Matter movement, Plowshares, Rockefeller, Tides, Ford, on and on. I mean, that's just tip of the iceberg. The Democratic Party does not ever speak up against Antifa. No member of Congress does. The party itself does not. Only against the fascists. What is coming? Convergence, again, of the 3 things that I talked about today. The convergence of the Black Lives Matter movement, the Muslim Brotherhood in America, and anarchists, which are communists. The willingness to embrace U.S. enemies, use violence, disrupt the political discourse in this country is what unites them at the moment. Law and order, the system, and America are their targets. This is Management of Savagery. You can find it online. As I said, as far as I know, it's never been published in hard copy, so you have to go online to see it, but that's what it looks like. It is translated. You can read it in English. In other words, cause the collapse of society, then take advantage of that savagery and chaos to seize control. How do we know? Where is this coming from? It's coming out of campuses, our university campuses. It is coming out of the Muslim Brotherhood, their conventions and conferences. It is coming out of, and watch next year, 2018, as we get back into a political election year for local offices and for Congress. It's going to erupt at the rallies again. Look at November the 4th coming up. What do we need to do? What you're doing here right today, thank you again for being here, educating yourself, learning about this, finding out what is up against, what we are up against. Be proud of who we are. Be proud of our Western identity. Treasure these things that I call first, well, not I don't call, these are the first things. Individual liberty, equality under man-made law, government by consent of the governed, protection of minorities, etc. We seek to conserve what is valuable in our society against chaos and tyranny. We have to know that that's what we stand for. Learn, confront, conduct study and analysis, and then what everybody can do in your own families and your own communities. Be proud of American achievements, our culture, our heroes. Relearn the history of America, of Western civilization. Teach that to our children or those in our family, nieces, nephews, grandchildren. Honor the heroes who keep us free. Founding Fathers, Medal of Honor recipients, all of our special forces, military, and law enforcement. Questions?
Do Black Lives Matter and Antifa ever come together and work together in their uprisings?
Absolutely. I couldn't include all the slides. I cut out about half the slides from this presentation when I realized how tight our time was. So there's a bunch of stuff missing, but I have a photograph of a demonstration. It's a protester marching down the middle of the street. Well, it's several protesters, and it's a Black Lives Matter protest, and they've got these signs about, end racism, end Islamophobia. And then you look down at the bottom, and they're very nicely pre-printed signs, the sort that very professional looking, Rev Com USA, meaning Revolutionary Communist Party USA. That's who printed them for the Black Lives Matter movement. And I don't know necessarily that even all the marchers, all the demonstrators, all the people, the kids in the black ninja outfits even know where the group comes from. What is the history? What is Antifa? What is They don't all necessarily know that, but I'll tell you what, the leadership does. The leadership absolutely knows what they're doing. And so does Moscow. In the back.
Thank you. I have, what I was starting to say was, I've grown to have such a disdain for the Democratic Party and the rhinos in this country. To me, they're the biggest security problem we have for the country, for the United States of America. And someone said that when you educate the young, you take over a country. And the biggest problem we have connecting the Democrats to public education in this country is you start teaching those little kids, like in 2000 when Gore lost to Bush in 2000, and by the time they were 18, they were voting twice for Obama because of the money that was coming into the education of these kids when they were 10. They had 8 years to prepare, and they were this close to taking over the country last November. This close until divine intervention stepped in.
The progressive movement in the United States, no, you're absolutely right about the education system, spot on. The progressive movement in this country began, I don't think people realize this, but before the 1800s were out. By the early 1900s, you had Teddy Roosevelt, you had Woodrow Wilson, our presidents, strong, progressives. They were the ones, Franklin School, that deliberately got inside targeting our academia and the educational system in this country. They knew what they were doing from the beginning. Next.
In this area, a group has had impact. Students for Justice in Palestine, as it has across the country. Could you tell us something about the group and especially who's funding?
Students for Justice in Palestine has a presence on just about every single major and many minor university campuses across this country. They are a group that is anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, and pro-Palestinian, including pro-Palestinian terrorist organizations like Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and Hizballah. They are a direct offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. Remember where the Muslim Brotherhood is? It is Hamas in Gaza, and it has influence all across this country in groups like that, absolutely. Ma'am? Oh, sorry. He's got the microphone back here. We'll come back to you.
Hi. We have just passed a Senate law sponsored by Senator Rubio and 3 others on anti-hate. I think it's 115. 118. I'm close. In any event, Congress is taking it up, the House of Representatives. It's called a feel-good law. When I called Rubio's office, they said, don't worry about it, it's just a resolution.
That's what they said in Canada, too, when they passed M1. Yeah, this is exactly what happened in Canada.
So I would suggest that everybody, we're the Palm Beach County Tea Party. Yay! And we have, oh, thank you. That's the first hooray I've gotten in about 2 years. And then maybe it's 10 years already. In any event, we have written our congressmen, we have written our senators, too late there. And they're fighting us. Don't worry about it. That's all they tell us about. But it's the same
Keep it up.
resolution that
Don't stop.
Canada, no, we're not stopping.
You begin
I'm
with
just
the
telling
resolution, you
everybody.
end with legislation
Call your
that is an
congressman, call your
actual...
senator, call everybody.
Yeah.
To vote against this
You're right.
terrible, feel good. I said the only people that feel good about it
This
are
is
the
the
Muslim
leading edge.
Brotherhood.
Right. Of
Thank you
restrictions
very
on
much.
free speech. If you want to know where this goes, look at Europe. I'll give you an example just right now while he passes the microphone across here. There is a German guy, Stolzenberger is his name. He was prosecuted by the German government for posting something on a Facebook or a social media page. He was prosecuted and found guilty because he criticized Islam on social media. His sentence was suspended, okay, but he is a convicted felon in Germany for having criticized Islam. That's where this goes. Ma'am.
A question, is there anything that can be done to stop George Soros and his funding?
I think the best solution we have right now is exposure. George Soros, as you may know, was born in Hungary, but he is an American citizen. We can't just deport him. He's an American citizen. He's got armies of lawyers that he pays very well to make sure that he doesn't get caught up in any legal difficulties. So the best thing we can do about him is expose him at the moment.
Claire, don't you think it would be a shame that we would lose our black generation here in America to some of these radical groups as early as in the 80s, when many were in our prisons and the Muslims were going in there and converting them. I spoke with Waleed Ferris right here, that was at Florida Atlantic University at that time, and Mel Cohen, and I made that same statement to them at that time. And many of them need, to this day, inner city, outer city, educational and economic opportunities. And if we turn our backs on them, then these other radical groups will gladly use them. And I would say that yes, we need to recognize, but we have a responsibility as well, I feel.
You're right. No, you're absolutely right. But look at some of these cities from which many of these gang members, gangbangers come from. Chicago, Detroit, Baltimore. What do these cities have in common? They have Democrat rule, elected Democrat mayor, city council rule for decades. About the prison conversions, you're absolutely right about that. It's a serious issue. At the United States federal level prison bureau, but also at many state levels for bureaus of prisons at the state level, the imams that are allowed to be chaplains inside the system are affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood. By the way, do you know who began the Muslim chaplain movement for the United States Bureau of Prisons, for the U.S. military bureau, the chaplain program for the U.S. military back in the 1990s was someone whose name you may recognize, Abdurrahman al-Amoudi. Abdurrahman al-Amoudi turned out to be an al-Qaeda financier and a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. He was caught with $300 and something thousand in a duffel bag at Heathrow Airport. Finally tripped him up. He said he found it outside his hotel room, and he really didn't know where it came from, but I wish I had that problem. But anyway, he was part of a plot funded by then leader of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, to assassinate the then Crown Prince, later King, now deceased Abdullah. So Abdurrahman al-Amoudi, Al-Qaeda Muslim Brotherhood, is the one who founded the U.S. military chaplain corps and vetted the first group for 5 years who went through that program and are still serving. It's the same story in the U.S. Bureau of Prisons. It is Muslim Brotherhood chaplains who are in there. And yes, you get special food, you get special treatment if you convert, you know, what's not to like. And then you're out at some point and off you go.
Is that when we get out of prison soon?
No, not soon. His sentence was 23 years, and I think he was convicted. Somebody help me if I don't remember this right, but I think it was something like 2004 or thereabouts. And even if his sentence had been commuted, I heard there was a possibility of that, it was 23 years to begin with. So no, he won't get out soon, but, you know, he's doing prison dawah. So in the meantime.
Thank you, Claire. To piggyback on that gentleman's statement about SR 118, which was sponsored by Marco Rubio, was written by Muslim organizations, MPAC, Engage, other Muslim organizations. It was written by them, and the companion bill, HRES 257, not to be confused with HR 257, which is pro-Jerusalem, but H Resolution 257 is being co-sponsored by Brian Mast and by Dave Bratt. Yes, it's on record. Government.track. Yes, he did, and he's on record as co-sponsoring that along with Dave Bratt. And you could ask Wild Bill for America what happens when we pass those kind of resolutions. He never got his iPad back. Landed in Canada for an Islamic conference, and he had his stuff confiscated for smuggling hate speech.
Spent the night in jail before he got deported back to the United States, never gave his speech. Here in the front, maybe.
Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. One of his rules were always to blame your opponents for what you're actually guilty of. Now, as we all watch CNN and MSNBC and listen to Hillary Clinton, isn't it perfectly obvious that how they're blaming Trump for the Russia thing when they are now actually the ones who are guilty of it?
You may recall that Hillary Clinton wrote her master's thesis on whom? Saul Alinsky. It's online if you'd ever like to read a screed about Saul Alinsky. He was her advisor and professor. We recommend reading that. It's a slim paperback. It's not terribly long, Rules for Radicals. We recommend everybody get a look at that to know what's in it. Yeah, absolutely. One last over here.
Hi, relating to the management for savagery, Muslims, as we know, believe that in that chaos that they want to bring, the final mukti would come, right? So that's part of their agenda. Right. May I ask, I've heard that Boca is targeted as one of the 30 no-go zones in all of America. What do you know about that? And also my Guatemalan pastors, they say they're rioting now and Soros is involved, and Hillary has an office down in Guatemala, and I wonder why they would be targeting in Guatemala.
Guatemala is going, I'll go backwards with your questions, but Guatemala is going through a very tough time right now. It's very serious in terms of rule and law of law in Guatemala. The democratically elected president is under siege by opponents who are using the Department of Justice in Guatemala, for example, to attack him, to try to delegitimize him, and to install themselves in his place. Rule of law and order and democracy in Guatemala, just in brief right now, is under assault. I don't know about the office here in Boca. I don't know that. You probably all know that, better than I do. And the first part about management of savagery, this does line up with the eschatological beliefs of Islam. Both Shiite and Sunni have the belief that there is a Mahdi, their messianic figure, who'll come back at the end of time, usher in the Day of Judgment, and the rule of the Mahdi and 1,000 years of Islamic rule and peace and justice, etc. And at least on the Shiite side, this is not the Sunni side. Sunni majority, Shiites are the minority in the world. The Sunnis kind of believe that the Mahdi's going to come back whenever the Mahdi's ready, and he'll choose the time and the place. But on the Shiite side, this is what Iran is Shiite, and they are the minority in the world. But for a country like Iran, whose regime is driving for deliverable nuclear weapons, It's a little alarming when their belief, their eschatological belief about the Mahdi is that he has a specific identity as the 12th Imam in a line that followed after Muhammad, and that they think they can, in the words of a friend of ours, hotwire the apocalypse, and that is to make the Mahdi come back sooner than he otherwise might have by causing enough chaos and strife and warfare on earth that he'll feel compelled to come back and set it all straight. That's what you're alluding to. That is a specifically Shiite belief, but pretty alarming when, you know, the entire top leadership of the Iranian regime is 12ers.
I wouldn't want you to get the wrong idea about Claire. She's a lot of fun to go on a cruise with.